Hughes Studios. We've been doing visual effects for feature films for 20 years and decided to jump into VR. Everything we're doing is all about 6 degrees of freedom and trying to make the most immersive experience that the medium allows. So it's very important to us that everything we do is, you've got your head and your hands in the space with you. We're developing our own intellectual properties. We've got a couple of projects out there. The Abbott's Book, we premiered at Sundance, and then Dragonflight, we premiered at Tribeca. It's a pretty exciting time.
My name is Ben Rice. I'm the Director of Business Development for FOTV Media Networks, which is a digital entertainment conglomerate that owns a variety of companies, chiefly Hologram USA. Hologram USA is the exclusive patent holder for Pepper's Ghost projections in North America. So we're certainly more on the augmented reality side of VR AR. But the tie-in also is we're creating our own theatrical distribution system of theaters nationwide that'll be fully equipped for a 360 video and VR viewing in all of our shows. So
everyone's looking at me.
Let's go down.
My name's Morris May. I started a company about 3 years ago called Specular Theory. So we're a creative technology lab. We create immersive content, both technically and creatively. We're well known for a series of film called Perspective, which went to Sundance and Tribeca and a few other markets. Our recent projects are, we won the first Streamy for VR, which is a project called MapPat's Game Lab, which is actually 45 minutes of virtual reality content, was part of YouTube Red.
Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Tim Dillon, executive producer for MPC VR, which is Moving Picture Company, global VFX studio making film and advertising. And we launched our VR division, I'd say 2 years plus ago now. Worked on projects for films such as The Martian, Goosebumps, Suicide Squad, and also for brands like Google Tilt Brush. Worked with all the directors you know and love, like Chris Melk and Guy Shalmadine, for projects like.
Cool. I'm Jeff Nicholas. I was co-founder of an agency called The Uprising Creative. We launched a VR content studio called Vehicle VR. I recently left in April to form a company called Create and Destroy, which is an independent VR consultancy where I'm directing and producing and consulting on a wide variety of immersive and VR content, namely the Hulu series with Live Nation, directing that piece, a piece with Ford Performance, Budweiser, Comedy Central, a bunch of others. So, content creation.
Hey, how are you? Sorry I'm late. I had a delayed flight this morning. My name is Tom Wright. I'm managing director of Entropic and a founder of Tactic. Tactic is a VR company. We do both service and product. Entropic is more of a visual effects entity along the lines of MPC, but Tactic is very much an engineering-led enterprise VR product company. So we've done a lot of work both in content for, we've sort of been the bespoke partner for a lot of content companies, like commercial production companies who want to do VR. But at the same time, we've been developing products along with startup partners up in San Francisco, where I'm based, as well as in Los Angeles and New York, where our other offices are.
Thanks, Tom. Better late than never.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So let me see a show of hands of
terrible.
everybody here who's in the brand space. You work for a brand and dealing with VR from the branding aspect. Anybody?
No.
Is everybody here content or VR? Raise your hand if you're working in VR currently. Okay, good to know.
Nice.
So guys, it's gonna kind of lob this to one of you guys to kind of start off. Maybe Tom, you or Tim, you guys can handle this. Kind of want to start with the brand attraction. I mean, VR is new. Everybody's excited about it. It's a great buzzword, but really, what is the brand attraction right now to the whole VR phenomenon?
You know, right now for brands, and I won't speak for all of us, but my background is working in advertising agencies for many years, and my last agency job was running Xbox Global and Halo Global and these sort of like IP related brands that also have a game engine component to them, like Gears of War and these things that are very engine based. So for them, like, it's having relevance with this kind of leading indicator of consumer behavior, which are gamers, which were the leading indicator of social behavior, who are the like rabid adherents of all new things. And so to me, right now, brands who are attuned to that are becoming interested in VR. It's interesting, the earliest super high-level brand VR projects were all loss leaders for vendors. I mean, just to be totally straightforward, you know, like the Volvo experience, to my knowledge, cost the company that made it, you know, several $100,000. You know, like, these things are slowly becoming more viable and more exciting for brands. And as a result, for creators and people who are practitioners and developers and engineers, it's becoming a more realistic avenue for production.
Okay. And Tim, you guys are working, you have a lot of shows you're doing.
Yeah.
What's going on with you guys and the brands?
Yeah, I'll follow that one up. It's pretty varied for us, super varied. Like, so we look at it all as content in an individual project, case by case. You know, we did a launch film for Google Tilt Brush, which people might have seen, that's a brand piece for Google, right? It's a great product. It's all about what, you know, everyone knows Tilt Brush, what they were trying to do. And that actually is a mixed reality video, and it's somewhat more traditional of the things that we're creating in VR. But actually, a lot of the agencies that we've spoken to over the last couple of years have had a tough time selling in VR to their brands. It's largely become a 360 video, return on investment, audience number conversation. But then actually, we've been going to brands and saying, okay, well, for example, 2 weeks ago, we launched a piece real time, in meaning a room scale walkable VR experience for the Nature Conservancy, and they would consider it very much a brand effort. They had a campaign to run, they were fundraising for a key cornerstone of their campaign, and they wanted to use VR in the heart of it. But it's an event exercise, and then it will be released. But those are very different examples of brand pieces for us.
So I know, Ben, you were at FOTV, you guys have a lot of channels with all this immersive technology. Are the brands adapting to VR right now? Or?
Yeah, and you actually just touched on something very interesting as well. There's definitely a divide between the agency desires and the direct brand desires. You know, the agencies for PR, for PR purposes, there's a huge desire to seem innovative and on the cutting edge and miles ahead of where the client is. But in reality, they just want to keep selling the same media they always have. It keeps the lights on. When it comes to the direct brands, we almost work exclusively with direct brands. We would love to partner with agencies, but certainly with Intel, for instance, and partnering us with the Jimmy Kimmel Live series when we beamed Jimmy Kimmel through telepresence for the Country Music Awards. In 2 weeks, not much I can say about it, but a major Mexican brand of Anheuser-Busch is doing a AR holographic resurrection of a beloved Mexican pop icon at Dia de los Muertos. So basically anything that's authentic to the brand. I know authenticity is a huge buzzword, but if the shoe fits, brands are really excited to do things that are going to be talked about for years because everyone's, everything moves at the speed of light now.
I think everybody's hit on some interesting stuff about the hype cycle too. You know, there's a huge amount of hype around VR, AR. All the brands are like, oh, I have to have my VR piece. I have to have my VR app or whatever it is. And the reality is that it's not right for everybody. And there's a big schism between what people think it's worth and what they want to pay for it versus what it actually costs to make it. And it's a different conversation now, though, I think, than we were having a year ago. I was here a year ago on a panel where we were talking about funding in VR and AR, and the funding conversation then was like a bunch of people standing around a hole waiting for the first person to throw money into it. And now they've realized that, and now brands have realized, ways that they can track some metrics or they can start to get some value from it. So there is more money flowing. It's just a slower trickle than I think content creators would like.
I mean, like part of it, like for brand marketers, audience is always a thing. Like right now, with Daydream coming out, that's a giant thing for brands. That's going to be a huge mobile accelerator. With PlayStation VR, like that popping, like all of that is going to make it much more real for brands. And I think like for all of us who've been in it for a little while, and I think I was on the same panel a year ago, and we talked about this, like it's, it really took a lot of adventurism a year and a half ago to invest in VR for a brand. And right now it's expected, for a CMO who is on an 18-month, 24-month career cycle within a brand, it's expected that they have a plan for that. And so, for all of us who are slightly downstream of that and who are creatives and who are trying to produce things and make products or content, it's approaching kind of that great moment. But I think that like clearly like the spring is going to be the time. Like we're like all the people who are making products around VR are going to pop them in September, October, November, December, and in the spring, all the brands are going to flock to it.
South by
So guys,
Southwest.
and I don't know
Sure.
if you guys can answer this, but you guys are on panels similar last year talking about funding. Where's the money coming from? Is it from, on the content creators, the brands? Is it from like the Samsungs, Intels, on the handsets? I mean, where are you guys seeing the money's flowing from?
It's coming from China.
That's
No,
true.
there's a lot of money flowing from a lot of different areas right now. I think it's not big. It's not big substantial budgets in the terms of like a feature film or a feature TV series or anything like that. But we are seeing the distribution platforms are paying for content. Brands are paying for content. There's some advertising going against it. There are deals being worked out with the agencies about back end that doesn't even exist yet. I mean,
Sure.
all of these funding conversations are happening in real time right now, and I will say, we are in a place now where we're seeing 6 to 7 figures going into certain projects where before, like we said a year ago, we were not seeing that. It was
It's turning into it's showing signs of turning into a healthier ecosystem.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the unusual position of being able to focus on our own IP without to date having really needed to tap too much into the VC realm. We're looking at companies like Baobab, for instance, landing a $25 million round for narrative, which is what we're all about. So that's a pretty exciting development. That kind of money is being freed up in what people surely must be thinking of as an experimental mode.
I mean, if you look to it I think there's the Live Nation Next VR Citibank announcement that just came out where Citi's going to be sponsoring a bunch of shows that are being, presented by Live Nation and streamed live in Next VR's version of VR. That's a huge development when you think about a brand attaching in that way to something as ephemeral as live VR.
But do you think I've got a question about money that already existed for live shows in Live Nation's case, and they're redirecting it into VR, or do you think that's on top of what they would have been doing anyway?
It's a good question.
I mean, it feels like that's a great question, actually, because it is like it's a relevance question as well for brands and for providers and media companies and event providers where, for Live Nation, it's of interest to be at the leading edge of what they do and what people want to see. And to your point, like that's their investment. So
I suspect it's that. I suspect it's replacing something that they
Exactly.
were already planning on doing. So from a funding perspective, you're seeing things moving into VR, which is a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's different from a new fund or a new budget being brought to the industry. But we're seeing it's so widespread and so varied. Again, we're working with movie studios. Every single movie studio has a different prerogative. They're coming to it for different reasons. Whether something is considered marketing material, whether something is considered content, as it would be
Original.
a home entertainment, original, game release, whatever vertical it falls into. But the clarification of categories over the last year is really helping. The narrative category or the gaming category.
Right.
I mean,
so
we're seeing everybody jump in right now too, though. It's Amazon. I'm hearing talks of them jumping into VR in a big way. It's every distribution platform, every content provider that you can think of has jumped in, and that speaks to that hype cycle. It's what what is real? You know, where are we seeing real budgets, and where are we seeing people go, I'm just there because I need to be there?
Yeah, a lot of stuff is complete announcements. It's, imagine this thing takes off as predicted and you didn't have a plan to addressing it, you'll be fired as a studio exec. I mean, I kid you not. I mean, this is going to be a new way to make revenue that's never happened before. It's a new way to reach an audience, a new way to reach brands, and if you're not engaged in that and you miss it. So I think a lot of these things are just announcements to try to build hype to the reality of what's actually happening is.
Yeah, there's two funnels that the money will come in for, right? It's either you're going to have a return on investment through investors and stakeholders, or on the other side of the coin, it's branded entertainment. It's replacing branded content, which everyone's talking about at this whole conference, with branded VR content. And, the money comes through both places. We were fortunate enough to be started by a self-proclaimed eccentric billionaire. Think of him as a big bag of money, who owns 30 Coca-Cola bottling plants around the world. So we've had the good fortune of doing crazy, exciting things, making them happen. But now that we're going forward with our IPOs, we're going to have to keep track of those balance sheets. But there's a lot of really cool, innovative investors coming to the table. So there's a lot of excitement in the category.
So one of the things, you mentioned like people like Amazon, like there are this sort of like rarefied group of people who have these innovation labs and we do a lot of work for Amazon and for Apple and for a few other companies that do these sort of leading edge versions of, like whether it's web VR prototypes or content prototypes and things like that. Like there's that group of people who are doing these amazing, really interesting things where they want to build out the next thing that's going to happen in 5 years, and that's glorious. And to the extent that we can participate, it's an honor. But there's everybody else who have 92% of the money, who are going to spend on things in the next 5 years in terms of advertising and content creation, and they all need an audience. And I always I keep coming back to the sort of like mobile VR as being like the skinny end of the wedge that's going to like open people up to everything. And then the headsets are going to kind of approach the facility of mobile VR. Like the Oculuses and everybody's going to sort of like become a little bit less tethered and a little bit more interesting, and probably a little bit more neutral in terms of reality, whether it's virtual or blended or whatever. And that's this kind of like 10-year continuum. And for all of you and for all of us, we have to pick our moment along that continuum. And I don't know all of you, and I don't know what you want to do and what you have done, but there is kind of this spectrum of now until then, when VR and AR have sort of melded together, and it's this sort of like smart, real-time version of content, information, creativity, content, you kind of have to pick your moment, and it's a fascinating time to be getting into it, and I'll stop there. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Sorry about the non-answer statement.
And I know we have a question. Let's just stop for a question real quickly before we move on.
Hey guys, at the end of the day, this is about distribution, right?
Yeah.
Currently, Oculus and not only via web function, I'm in VR too.
Yep.
And also diving in like an idiot into this black hole. But Oculus and Vive have sold, 100,000 units each.
Mm-hmm.
Sales have plateaued. PlayStation VR is available everywhere where they were predicting that it was going to be sold out all over the place. So what are you guys' thoughts about distribution? Because at the end of the day, yeah, the brands and the Hollywood studios are going to have to be in VR, just like they had to be in push technology in the 90s, or had to be in whatever it was. But if we don't get to distribution, if we don't get to the tens of millions of units out there in people's living rooms, how is this going to work?
I know
When are we going to get there?
whoever's going to answer this, which is a really great question,
Yeah.
I was going to segue into how scalable is AR, VR. across all platforms. So whoever wants to take on this answer, kind of segue over to that.
I'll jump right in on that. So everything that we're working on, we look now at the tools that have come out in the last year, the Vive, the Oculus, we look at as a development platform that exists a couple of years from now that's more well-suited to a mass market because it's cheaper components, it's better processors, it's untethered, et cetera. So the project like Abbott's Book, for instance, that currently requires a very high-level PC and a bunch of wires coming off your head to really experience. We say, okay, well, this is cool, but in terms of the distribution world that we're sort of brainstorming about, we think that the real meat is on the bone a couple of years from now. There is money to be made in the short term. We think it's in the arcade space. I know you personally will be happy to hear. And China. So in the short term, we look at, the short term being, let's say the next year and a half or so, we look at arcades as a way to turn into this magical creature, this VR company that can actually pay the bills on its income. In the long term, in the 2 years, 3 years, 10 years time frame, we look at the emergence of, the more capable, essentially the technologies that we're calling mobile today, becoming much more capable over the next 2-3 years or so, and becoming thereby the mass market that everybody's hungry for right now.
Well, and it's also not unlike the model of gaming, where you have a couple major players. You have your Xbox and you have PlayStation, and then in streaming over-the-top TV, you have your Roku and Apple TV. So, it's not about competing for distribution with the hardware, it's about the content itself. And, I'll speak for us, FOTV Media Networks, we own an OTT platform, Film On, which is really embracing 360 and VR viewing content. So we're also looking for more VR content out there that can sync with our platform. And I think a lot of other people are going to follow this trend, all the other OTT platforms, whether you're an emerging like Complex or Crackle with Sony PlayStation, things like that. They're just, all the publishers are going to start to adopt integrating 360 and VR video content into their platforms. So there's your distribution model. That's content.
Well, I was just going to say there's two parts to that conversation. One is hardware and one is platform, or scalability of getting content to devices, whatever those devices may be. And I think something that Tim said earlier about mobile VR being sort of the tip of that wedge. If you look at it, the way that I look at it, and I'm sure many of us do, and there's differing opinions on this, but the way that I look at it is if we can create content that can exist across multiple platforms right now, and that means that in some senses a VR experience, a true VR experience where you've got room scale that actually has the ability to kind of engage with that environment, will be limited to the amount of people that can access it. But if there can be an experience from that can be accessed by anyone who has a handset, as a 360 video, that's just going to help, if done right, help the adoption of, or help the interest in VR AR, and hopefully help the adoption of the hardware necessary to get to mass distribution of bigger VR experiences.
I agree. I agree with everything everyone's saying. We're all waiting. I'm agreeable. I'm waiting for the mainstream moment. Everyone asks us all the time, in business meetings, in panels, what's the mainstream moment? How's this going to tip over? None of us have the answer for that, but it feels to me like it's an AR question. I don't personally think that AR is a superseding medium over VR. I think, as you said, blended and mixed reality, and we're all starting to talk that way, is a better way to talk about it. There are different categories for different reasons. But Apple launching a mixed reality pair of glasses like they launched the iPhone is a mainstream moment. Is Magic Leap launching a pair of Google glasses in a year's time that mainstream moment? Maybe. But
once they're bought by Apple, they will.
There you go. That's
I mean, I think the thing is, it's like, there's no way of telling it. I think if you look back at TV or you look back at film and you ask those questions in the early days, how is someone going to see this? How is someone going to engage with this? There are no TV sets in your home. What does this content even mean? That's changed, and you could have never predicted how it would change or which direction it would go. And I think if we're all, there's a lot of great minds, much smarter than other people on the panel, I'll speak for myself, much smarter than me, doing the research to try to figure it out, but I don't think you can, because human behavior, you can't peg it like that. So we're all creating content, and we're hoping for, different forms of distribution to work, but the one that actually ultimately survives in 5 years may not be one that we even can see right now.
I think one more thing real fast. It depends on your vantage point too, right? I'm agreeable. It depends on your vantage point, as in we're sitting here in the States looking at it from a US-centric perspective. If you're sitting in China right now, where largely your VR conversation is about the 100 to 1,000 VR arcades that are opening and the centers that you're going to, and it's more about the category of physical location-based VR. It's not about how many PlayStation headsets there are. So it depends. I mean, yes, there's Europe and the US, but there's Asia and there's other battles there,
It's just, I guess I have a different way of thinking of it as usual.
You're disagreeable.
But yeah, I know, I'm the opposite of my good comrade friend here. But if you think about it, where's the hardware? It's like, you buy that hardware now, there's nothing. This without any software is like zero. So no one's going to buy a PlayStation or a PS3 or any of these devices until you really have the ultimate killer app that drives you and entertains you and engages you, and we don't have that. Not only do we not have that, but we don't necessarily think we even have the creative processes to put together what that will be or understand it. So I don't think of it at all as a hardware problem. I think of it as a new medium that's not explored properly, and there's going to be that killer app that kind of comes together, and that's kind of what we've been trying to work through, exactly how to break the fourth wall in a VR kind of way. But I mean, most people don't realize, but you can watch a VR video on Twitter or Snapchat or Facebook or YouTube, or every platform now supports that in some way. So that, as you wisely pointed out, what that content could lead to somebody who will envelop something that's going to be engaging enough for us to spend $800 on something for our living room.
So, I mean, essentially VR is still in beta. We're in beta. 3 years later, we're still in beta.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I guess, there's sort of a, yes, it's all out there, but I do think that as hardware releases that allows a more robust experience, it's going to become more fascinating, more, there's a certain amount, to your point, it's a great point, there's not the killer app or the amazing VR experience.
I never think of more robust equaling, you can say it's a better experience, I had more resolution, but I mean literally something that just says, that thing was so freaking engaging, I'm running to the store to buy it, and you have that interpretation of it, which
sure.
I think we'll see at some point.
No, I think one of the things I was thinking on the way here is that, the person within this era and this generation who's best at this has not tried this yet. It's the kind of a medium where people are going to be inspired by participating, by seeing it, by seeing what they could do, and they're other artists or they're other technologists or developers or whatever, and they create the thing that is the thing. And that's part of what's exciting to me, and I think all of us in this large room here, is that it is a partially explored territory where people still can make something remarkable, which is in terms of just human endeavor awesome. So.
And let's not forget things we haven't seen yet too, right? So
sure.
Tilt Brush led to Medium and Quill. Oculus guys are inspired by that. Now there are genuine fine artists working inside Medium, creating animation that they wouldn't have been able to create because that tool set's bigger than any other 3D creation tool. And you start to see what they were showing on stage, Oculus Connect. You're like, okay, well actually there's tools here that are creating VR inside VR, like the short film Quill, it's 2D illustration that they've animated and created and putting out at Sundance. And that's the first time that would have happened. So, question is, if you're a filmmaker, how do you make a film inside VR with a virtual camera? The equivalent of that in live action terms is a whole different proposition,
Well, it's like that scaffolding thing. It's like, we don't know. None of us, coming into VR, there was no roadmap for it. There was a little bit. You could borrow from theater, or you could borrow from game, or you could borrow, but the languages weren't there. And as it's being developed, everybody who's coming into it and getting inspired is adding another layer or adding another brick on top of that, and showing us what can be done.
It's incredibly exciting to look at the bits of technology that are sort of sprinkled around the field right now, just starting to sprout.
Yeah.
So Google's Tango project, for instance, and the ability, to your point on, somebody's going to grab a let's call it a device rather than a phone. Somebody's going to grab some $200 or $500 device and be able to make a 3D environment in a way that they never have been able to before, without deep expertise in the kind of business that we've been doing in the visual effects field for a long time.
Yeah.
And then you can just sort of riff on the kinds of technologies that can easily sit on top of that, whether it's recovering, not to get too technical, BRDFs from environment as you move around them or whatever. The point being, there's going to be some incredible tools that emerge, and none of us can wait to see the kinds of things that people are going to do with them. We're making up tools as we go right now, and kind of, chuckling with each other about, like, oh my God, nobody's done this before in this way, and we need to hire 5 patent lawyers right now.
Yeah, one of the things about this, and I'll kind of step back a little bit into that kind of space race narrative, Skillman and Hackett, the people who made Tilt Brush, up until 4 months before they were bought by Google, they were just 2 guys who had made Tilt Brush. That's the foundation of a bunch of tool sets for everybody else to create off of the back of Tilt Brush. And Skillman and Hackett, I would see them at we would host SFVR at my office, and they'd be there demoing and whatever. And it is an interesting moment, because all these things that are kind of foundational to what's going to happen in the next 5 years, they're still happening. All of you here, whatever, 100, 200 people here, 100 people here, you could create the thing, whether it's the story, whether it's the plug-in, whether it's the left turn when everyone expected a right turn in terms of narrative or navigation or user experience. All of you could create that. And I think, to me, that's what's been exciting about this. And I think everyone up here probably feels the same way, is that everyone on this table and everyone at your tables is able to create whatever the next thing is, which is fantastic.
So I have a question. I'm like Ben, Morris, and Tim. That'd be a good question for you guys. I don't want a cliche that content is king, but what are you guys doing with original programming for VR?
Everyone looks to me, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. We have probably 15 pieces of original content in production at the moment in various stages, whether there be just literally a drawing on the back of a napkin versus something that's supposed to be 20 minutes long that's now 18 minutes long. So it runs the gamut. So we try to create those internally to learn about what works and refine our tool set and our thinking about the space. Did that answer your question?
Kinda.
I think I've been doing a lot of original content development work over the last 2 years, year and a half, and developing original content for VR is massively different than it is for any other medium. And we're now producing a lot of that stuff too, and some of it's coming to market. And the interesting thing about the original content space is the conversation around what we're calling what we're doing. Is it storytelling? Is it creating are you telling a story? Are you engaging the person in the story? How do we talk about it? How do we craft it? And what does it become ultimately? And a lot of the original pieces that we're working on, will be series, because and it's people only watch 5 minutes at a time, so you better make it a series. Well, maybe that's not true, we don't know, but we're all exploring it. So it's funny, because on the original side, the brands are really attracted to the original content pieces, and that's where I think branded content in VR is changing a little bit from traditional branded content, because it needs to be almost original that a brand is attached to. to work. Otherwise, why are you going to watch it, I think.
Yeah.
We're doing something quite a bit different as feature programming, since we're an entirely different platform. We're augmented reality, we're holography. What we're doing is we're aggressively acquiring IP rights for deceased celebrities and creating full-length greatest hits and narratives. So just like you saw Tupac at Coachella, we're actually going to be rolling out a whole series of full-length shows and building out our own theatrical distribution platform. So we're actually breaking ground in January 2017 of the first ever all hologram theater in Hollywood, across the street from Musso and Frank. All of our theaters are going to have 360 VR cameras in them, so people can watch all of the productions from the comfort of their own home on their smartphones or devices. And so we have, next year coming out, we have Billie Holiday and her greatest hits with a live band. We have Whitney Houston, with Judy Garland, and Buddy Holly, just to name a few.
Wow. Bring them back to life, huh?
Yep.
I mean, original content is probably a lot of people in VR's focus because it's different. VR's different, but also from an NPC perspective, we put a lot of time into a bunch of different projects, and VR is difficult. You know, VR work is hard to create, especially at a premium level where things look good and you don't have to make compromises. And so we've spent a bunch of time figuring out what we're happy to do and what we're not happy to do, you know, leave on the table, picture-wise. And it's a tough decision, but I think if you're going to slave away on a piece of work, you want that piece to be something that has a life to it, that's going to travel through the world, that people are going to receive in a certain way. So marketing an existing piece of IP, putting all that time into it is not, it's a great thing to do if you find an original way to do it, but it's also, if you're going to put that much time into it, why not make it an original piece that can be episodic, that can have a life beyond that, you know? So I think that's why a lot of people are gravitating towards original, and you get a lot of creatives entering VR because, let's face it, there aren't budgets to make features and short films, and why not try and do that in a new medium in VR instead, you know?
One of the things that comes to mind as we talk about this as well is who are the people that are buying what we're making. I ask that because we go back and forth ourselves quite a bit. Are we making, so we're doing everything 6 degrees of freedom, room scale. Your hands are in the space with you, and you can walk around, and you want it to be interactive, and the person having the experience to have agency. What do we call that person? Is that person playing a game, or is that person a different, is this like somebody who's going to the movies? Do they consider themselves a gamer?
Or an actor.
Yeah. So, we like to think of them exactly as a sort of participant in a theater in the round sort of event. Point being, we think one of the things that needs to be invented here is a nomenclature for the audience that wants to participate in the VR experience, because gamer doesn't quite get it. We're not putting a shotgun in your hands and having you, run around, shooting demons. That's like.
I have a suggestion. I've always used the analogy, whether you're an individual or you're an organization, you're either a giraffe or an ostrich. Ostriches have their head in the sand. They're all about old technology. They miss everything around them, and that's great because they love what they're used to. And then giraffes just survey the land ahead, look for the next new thing, and are open to all ideas and experiences.
We lost someone. Someone walked out.
All right.
I think that's fair.
That was an ostrich. It was an ostrich.
Totally ostrich.
Totally.
You're right.
I thought someone from the panel walked out.
How many of you guys up here are immersed in the music space?
Sorry?
How many of you guys are immersed in the music space? Let's not talk about original programming content. We all know gamers are adapting to this. Let's talk about how this is affecting the music industry right now and what's going on with that.
Well, our experience has been relatively peripheral, but like we'll do a 360 experience around major artist music video, and we kind of tuck in under a music video production company and create the thing that is 360 around what they're doing for the rest of it, and that involves it's probably a four-person crew who shows up. There's essentially a director, someone who's handling the kind of IT of it, someone who's dealing with camera, and a second person who's dealing with camera because cameras are so bananas. But, like, our experience is that it is very secondary right now, and that the people who are creating content around music aren't necessarily 360 first. Like, it's the thing that they're doing that's going to go out with the thing that they've always done. And some of those are, like, the best directors. I mean, to be totally honest, like, those are tremendous directors of 2D content who have made stunning, genre-bending things, and we're happy to work with them. But the 360 portion of it is not primary at all, in our experience.
Have you guys seen the new Sony Music Kygo 360, the VR one?
Yeah, we made that.
We made that.
Brad Spar.
Yeah.
I just ran a Brad earlier on
Yeah.
that. Tremendous piece.
So people probably haven't seen that yet, but if they were at VR on the lot last week, Paramount, so we launched it there. It's Kygo, the EDM DJ, who played the Hollywood Bowl and closed the Olympic ceremony. It's his new single, and it's a real-time piece. So we started doing 360 music videos. We worked with Chris Milk on the U2 piece. We worked with a bunch of people creating those pieces, and they're interesting in their own ways, but they're challenged mainly technically because of the cameras and for all the reasons we all talk about. But actually creating a real-time piece for PlayStation is a different animal. And as you were saying earlier, it's in terms of hardware and getting it out there, the Kygo piece will be PlayStation first, but then Rift, Vive, and 360. So it's a cross-platform music video, trying to get to the widest audience, because for the fans of Kygo, but also defining a new format for Sony Music to actually release real-time music videos, cross-platform for individual songs and albums.
But so stepping back a little bit as a real-time piece, like what were I mean, I'm just actually curious, like, so the things, what was the biggest challenge for you guys?
I mean, we're a VR studio, so we're already talking about what real-time pieces are every day anyway, so you just apply all of that thinking to a music video. It's a defined length of music. You've got the vision of the artist. In this case, he's a tropical house DJ, so we started going into a tropical neon avatar-like world, and we're bouncing off ideas with him. And there was already a conversation right at the beginning of the project about it being a journey. So we chose a journey. It's a constant uplifting rise upwards from a cell level to a galaxy, and you're moving through forest and environments. So 6 or 7 different environment builds that you're moving through, and it's gaze-based to be democratic, so we don't have to be locked into touch controllers or Vive controllers. So we've got gaze-based interaction, but it's really the degrees of freedom and the parallax and the presence in the headset that you're gaining over a 360 video.
I've been in the middle of the music space for a long time. I came from working for John Silva as in-house creative director there, and directed music videos before I got into VR, whether it be for Rihanna and Justin Timberlake and a bunch of big artists. And now with what I'm doing in music, a bunch of stuff that I can't talk about here. And then my wife is running the new Techstars Music Accelerator that just launched, and they're out trying to solve problems and figure out, how can we help music industry make money and be more creative, and they're getting VR, pitches constantly. And I directed the Lollapalooza 360 content, I directed the Coachella 360 content, so it's an interesting space. There's a lot of interest, and what I see is, unfortunately, a lot of what you're talking about, which is, let's just put up a camera at something that is already happening.
Let's get to people and put up a camera.
And let's do some BTS on it, whatever. And the reality is, like, music is way more interesting than that. Music has the ability to really touch people in a way that no other medium can. And VR, I think, has the ability to transcend in the way that music can through a visual experience, through an immersive experience. I think the Kygo piece does an amazing job of that. Red Pill also does a really amazing job of creating real-time experiences around music. It's a landscape that is hard to work in because of the licensing restrictions, because of the layers of approval that are required, whether it be through label, management, artist, promoter, et cetera, down the chain. People think, yeah, let's just grab this track and make something really cool. And what you don't realize is that is almost impossible to do without a certain level of access to be able to get the rights and be able to release the thing. So the biggest challenge, I think, in music, in creating content for music, is that music is in its own way. The music industry gets in its own way. And you've got big players in the industry who want to, they've been through hell. They got dragged through the mud when Napster came, and now streaming comes and fucking YouTube's killing them. Like it basically, they've got a target on their back, and so they really are trying to keep their arms around everything. And it makes it really hard. So we're trying to break those walls down. And as we do, it's people like Sony in the Kygo piece, or the Live Nations or whatever it is, people are starting to explore. And that's what we have to have. We have to have that connection from content creator, technology, and artist, so that we can explore and then create something new.
Let's, Ben, ask you, like, there's a parallel universe between VR and hologram.
Right.
And I know you have a lot of artists that are dead, and you still have the rights management issues.
Oh,
so
well,
there's no
that's
way-
just it. And just like you said, where the music industry gets its own way, we've been very fortunate that Universal is all about breathing life into old catalogs. So they're really excited to partner with us on the production of deceased celebrity IPs, doing new greatest hits package rollouts. And then at the same time, we have a lot planned for telepresence too, especially with music festivals. I think there's a huge opportunity with things that are really inherently experiential with EDM. I mean, we beamed both the band Perry and Florida Georgia Line. We beamed them into multiple locations for the Country Music Awards. We beamed Mariah Carey into 5 different countries for an experiential campaign with T-Mobile. So we can beaming artists into other locations, so you can have multiple shows happening at the same time. There's a whole huge untapped opportunity.
So, social side of this is going to be huge. I mean, we haven't talked about that today. We all saw Zuckerberg on stage, I'm sure, on videos of him on stage anyway, last week, a week before. And social's massive. I mean, these SDKs for being able to take multiple people into experiences are only just being cracked open. But imagine the Kygo experience we're building, or the experience you're describing, where you're multiple people from all over the world, just as they already do in persistent worlds in gaming, can put a headset on and go to a place together. You're talking about programming for concerts and live experiences without having to leave your space. I mean, yes, there's people who are going to want to do that, and there are people who aren't going to want to do that. There'll be plenty of naysayers that say VR is not for me, but then gaming's not for everyone, cinema's not for everyone. I meet people all the time who say, I don't go to the theater anymore, I only watch movies at home, I only watch Netflix. The idea that VR and AR is for everybody is kind of a bad place to start. There's people who are going to like it, there's people who aren't going to like it.
Okay, we have like 10 minutes left. I want to open up for some Q&A, but really quickly, got to kind of walk down this. What, in your opinion, are your best use case of where you think VR is the most successful, whether it's music, gaming, what have you seen to date?
So one of the things, and I'm going to step back a few minutes in time to, I think it was a previous question about audience and things like that. I think that gentleman has left, but like for us as a company, we kind of came into this as a service company, and the audience was growing and nascent and all that, and like the economic realities of that forced us to look upstream and try to become more of an enterprise company. And so we partnered with a bunch of brands and a bunch of developers who couldn't do what we did, and created a bunch of products and things like that. But like right now, like there's this sort of interesting moment where huge companies are coming in within the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months with very broad platforms. But in the interim, like what we've done is looked at creating things that have an interoperability between platforms, that do things that allow people to be together, to experience things, or to collaborate on things, and to do something that is more social. We're not trying to become Facebook, obviously, but like to do things that are more collaborative and interactive than what you can do right now, in the absence of a Facebook that's going to tuck into Oculus for the first 6 to 12 months, et cetera. And I think that all of this, like all the people who are making things around VR, are looking for an audience. And to the extent that we or you can create things that are either platform neutral or interoperable as apps, is a huge opportunity. Like to the extent that all of you who want to make things, or who are creating products or content or whatever it is, like it is the opportunity for the next 12 months to make things that everyone can see and that everyone can access, whether it's across mobile, on the Vive, Oculus, et cetera. Like to the extent that you're platform neutral, you are the Android of content or product. So there you have it. That's
Yes,
what I would
guys,
say.
let's do quickly, because we've really got to wrap up in 8 minutes. Best use of VR.
Future use?
Future use next year. What are your predictions, best use of VR?
I would say, just like as an audience, something I'd love to see. For me, my favorite VR experiences are the ones that get me to do things that I've never done before and most likely will never do. Take me to the top of Mount Everest, put me, in the middle of some exotic jungle. So I think travel might be a huge vertical for that. And so any content creators that can really give someone an experience of just being somewhere in a different environment, not having to play a game maybe, or, if they're not a gamer, or watch a piece of content, I think travel and self-experience is a huge part of it.
I'm going to go completely against that, because as much as we all like to have experiences that we can't have, I think it has so much more potential than that, and that feels like such the lowest common denominator. And I know, I'm sorry, but it feels like such the lowest common denominator to just take some money, put them somewhere else. There's so much more that can be done with it. I have no idea what the best use is going to be. I'm not a futurist, but I do know that there is so much more that can be done with the technology than just putting you on the top of the mountain, and I can't wait to see what it is.
I would say, I think you're making a great point. For us, the answer to this question is our commitment to long-form narrative in VR in a way that the person experiencing it is actually participating in the story. And we feel like this is a medium that, this is why I think about our audience gamers, or are they an audience? We think there's a new category out there, and if we do this right, we help to shape that.
You can see that growing. There's a book, I don't know if you guys have read, called Ready Player One, which Spielberg's turning into a movie right now. And there's a couple of interesting references in there. There's a game that the key character has to get past. Essentially, he goes into a room, he goes through the wall of the room, he's in a virtual room, he goes through that wall, and he's in a film, he's in War Games with Matthew Broderick, and he has to play the game, and essentially the exercise for him is to repeat every single line of dialogue perfectly, and as he does, he moves through the game. But it's live action, it's completely indistinguishable from the 80s film, it's been recreated from the pixel from the ground up. It's concepts like that kind of make you think, well, we're not there yet. We're nowhere near close to that level of immersion. But when we are at that point, which is not that far away, then it's a different kind of thing to say someone's going to spend their time in something nostalgic, something futuristic. Mm-hmm. So I would say, there isn't one thing you could put your finger on.
Lawrence, any parting thoughts on that?
Education. Yeah, I think education is going to be game changing. You can imagine you can train yourself to be a superhero or digest information in a way that only VR is going to let you. So,
no, I think VR does a lot out there, as long as it's an immersive experience. There's a lot of different verticals coming up. But I want to kind of open up for a few minutes to the audience. Does anybody have any specific questions in the back? Brown jacket.
Hey guys, I'm in the tail end here, so there might be some redundancy in that, and I apologize for that. But I'm working on a big budget live action volumetric feature. So some of the stuff that I think we talked about in terms of parallax and anything involving being transported to real space as opposed to the spirit kind of dome that we're seeing live. I'm really interested in it, and I'm curious as to hear anything that you kind of know about that space that's going on that I may not have heard about, because I feel pretty educated in it, but I'm always interested to hear since this is
I'm just curious. So, like, it's a volumetric captured feature. What's your output? What are you planning to release on?
Well, as you know, the computational requirements just required to capture that, or
Yeah.
staggering, and the playback is just slightly below that. So we're initially focusing on location-based initiatives. It's strange to announce this to the room, but
That's awesome.
We are also actually at this kind of premium outlets.
Yep.
So it's right up my alley to talk to people like you to see this kind of forward-looking thing. This is already, we're already diving into the future before we're there.
Yeah, however you're doing it now, it's going to be outdated before you finish. That's the only.
Right.
That's true.
That's the only thing we know for certain.
It's a moving target.
I think, and this is great, we have 3 more minutes, so I think afterwards, this is more of an ongoing dialogue after with some of these guys. Does anybody have any quick questions?
What's up with airlines? Like, you got a captive audience worldwide.
Yeah, they're all in chairs too, which is amazing, which is a fantastic equalizer for VR.
Isn't somebody roll it out in business
They're all
class or something
doing
like that?
that.
They're all doing it, right?
Virgin
Yeah.
has them out at the gate, and the other
Qantas.
people are renting them. All the airlines have them.
Qantas started with Samsung and the Gear VR, but I think there's still a public stigma about wearing a headset. You know, like you can, there's a couple of people you might see on a plane wearing a headset, but there's an element, it's actually, like you're right, it's a private space to an extent. You're not gonna, going anywhere, but I think it's really about people wearing headsets more often, how people feel about that. Like I said earlier, some people aren't going to want to do it, other people will be fine with it.
There's a super dystopian image in my head of just like you walk on the plane and everybody's in a headset just fucking off. And there's a great film that's made on
I have a
that.
very funny story. I know we're running out of time, but I was in the airport lounge, and there was somebody, when I came back from Oculus Connect 3, and somebody put a headset on, and everybody was pointing and laughing at that person, like, what the heck? Because they'd never seen it before. And I did the same thing. I was like, oh, who is that idiot? And I just reached in, put mine on, just totally like normal, like.
Well, one thing about like the airlines use case, like the Qantas case, I think it was Qantas or
Qantas.
Singapore, but like someone who did this like upper class, first class version of VR, and like. But like the whole thing is like they give everybody a Gear VR with like 9 minutes of content on it, whatever, at the time, so for their 14-hour flight, across the
That's true,
Pacific.
yeah, and that was a year ago now or something, and the content would have essentially been a couple of things that Oculus had out. It's pretty slim, so it's to your point, it needs to be a whole plethora of amazing things to watch.
But it could be great.
We've been approached by people that do a lot of MRIs. So talk about a captive space,
Do we have time for one more question? Anybody?
I don't know if this is silly, but are there any efforts underway to involve users with their real bodies and getting scanned to participate in virtual reality for, like, oh, that's me, and there's someone who...
That's a good
Yeah,
call.
absolutely,
Question for
absolutely,
Ben.
yeah.
And offering to be part of projects, kind of like an open source performer or actor, or, yeah, you can use me, I'll be an extra, or...
Oh, interesting.
Well, we want you to be the star, actually. Everything we're doing is to, you sort of wear a second skin. You step into the roles of different characters in our stories. And, the question of how do we let you see yourself in VR is an interesting one. And we could talk for quite a while about that. I think the very brief answer to that is people are working on different sorts of sensors right now. There's some interesting work being done in terms of simple things like tracking your feet and knees and elbows in addition to your hands. You could talk a lot about how if that tracking isn't very good, it can break presence very quickly and yield a very bad effect. So if you're going to have it, you have to do it right. Anyway, I don't think we have time for a full
I
digest.
just want to give Ben a chance, a quick comment for a second, then we'll...
Well,
wrap.
no, I mean, what we do is ultimately, you can make a hologram of yourself, and we do certainly mocap and CGI and all that stuff. But in terms of like seeing yourself as a VR avatar, that's something that Facebook is in the infancy stage of putting together.
I'll plug one thing as well. Just 2 things worth checking out. The Oculus Connect avatars they launched, where you can design an avatar of yourself. And there's an app called Mind Show that was announced at a VRLA event, and that allows you to play characters, record it. It's actually kind of interesting from a filmmaking perspective. You can play 3 different characters, record it back, play against yourself as an
You
actor.
guys, unfortunately, we're out of time, so that's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Sorry, I know you...